And here we are for episode 2 of season 2 of the Exit Philosophy podcast. Rich Griffin, you can call him Griff. I'm Scott MacArthur. Some people call me Scotty Mac. And we are coming to you, Griff from Oakville, Ontario, Canada, me from Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada, on Tuesday, July the 16th. We decided to hold things off a day because we usually record new episodes on Monday for a couple of reasons. Number one, there were 2 NFL football games that had to be played instead of 1 yesterday. The weather in Buffalo forced the postponement of Sunday's game to yesterday, and Griff and I made picks. And I know you're not listening to us for our NFL playoff football picks, but we're a little neurotic that way. And then number 2, as Griff so aptly pointed out when we were discussing this, it gave the Toronto Blue Jays an extra day to maybe do something this offseason. But what's it? Another day. And maybe another day and another day and another day, something will happen at some point, Griff. We know that. Something. This is not Seinfeld. This is not nothing. Something.
We
something is going to happen.
We gave them an extra 24 hours from Monday to Tuesday, and I honestly believe that they're on the verge of doing something that will make this winter more palatable than it's been so far for the fan base. Because right now, what we're looking at is an inventory of great memberships to new social clubs and dining areas and no reason to buy. And so the Jays really do have to step it up. But yeah, no, the delay was more for football. I don't think either of us really believed that the Jays were going to make that significant move between when we were going to tape on Monday and then when we're taping right now.
You know me, Griff. I've always been this way, and I say it too. It's really true about any sport. When your favorite team is good and therefore interesting, I find like my investment in not just my team, but the entirety of the sport, the product, goes way, way up. And I've been a huge San Francisco 49ers fan, actually for almost literally 35 years. I became a 49ers fan in January of 1989 when I was 9.5 years old, and they were on that playoff run that culminated with them beating the Cincinnati Bengals in that Super Bowl, the Joe Montana to John Taylor drive late in the fourth quarter that gave the Niners that Super Bowl championship. And I've been a fan ever since. And so I'm right in it because the 49ers are arguably, I know Christmas night changed a lot of opinions, but at the very least, arguably the best team in the NFL. They've got to go out and prove it through these playoffs. But just having them play at such a level and be so entertaining to watch with their high-powered offense, it's like so the fact that we delayed it by a day, well, our football picks were as much a part of what we wanted to talk about as anything, because we picked all 6 games last week. We want to see how we did, and we want to throw our picks out for the 4 games this coming weekend.
And to your point, I agree 100% because I've been watching Raptors games over the holidays and including one, I think, yesterday. And there's no expectation. There's low expectation. You get they really played hard. They played well. You know, they stayed in that game for 3 quarters and then they just didn't have the legs to finish it. And there's less, like, I think there's less angst among Raptors fans this year than at any point where I can remember since they won the championship or even before that. And it's like, oh, I'll watch the game. But whether they win or lose isn't really, because they're not going to win. They're not good. And to your point, when a team is good, you get invested and you get emotionally involved. And I think Raptors fans are losing that feeling and need to get it back.
Yeah, I think getting RJ Barrett in town, just local guy, hometown blood, that helps, at least in a sort of with a short-term shocker to the system. Like, wow, okay, there's something and someone new to look at. Oh, and he's one of us. Like, he's a local guy. He's not just Canadian. He's a Mississaugan. He's a GTAer. But to your point, there are two different types of fun seasons, right? I feel like I'm living one with the 49ers right now, where my favorite team are front runners and everybody's gunning for them. And somebody might say, well, how can the Niners be front runners? How many Super Bowls have they won in the last 3 decades? And okay, that's fair. But the Niners have been to 3 of the last 4 NFC championship games. They are a win away from making that 4 out of 5. They have the first seed in the NFC, home field advantage. They're coming off a bye week. Like, theoretically, they should be the top team. So that's one way to enjoy your favorite team. The other one is, and this is what the Raptors don't have, but this would be the logical next step, which is the team that doesn't have a whole lot of expectations, exceeds those expectations, and is making a push toward the playoffs late in the season. And then everybody's on board because they're winning more than they're losing. And they're this upstart team doing it against the odds. There's a player or two who become the heroes of the entire script. And so that's also a lot of fun. And then the additional thing with the NFL, of course, is that you play once a week. So if you really care, you have 7 days, sometimes 6, sometimes 8, but usually 7 days to stew on a loss or feel good about a victory and really look forward to seeing if they can compound that the next week. So I just think the way the NFL has it right now, and I know there are a lot of problems with the league, but just the structure of the National Football League, and it's reflected in the ratings, and they're moving some games to streaming at this important time of year. So we're starting to see the onset of that pivot. The structure of the NFL just really lends itself to entertainment, fun, talking points, content. It's constant.
We'll get around to that at the end of this episode of Exit Philosophy. But the one thing I notice about your Niners is that 7 of the 8 remaining teams have a first-round quarterback leading them in the playoffs, and your Niners have Mr. Irrelevance leading them.
Mr. Very Relevant now.
But there's the big difference, and they're the best team, arguably, going into the final 8, going into the quarterfinals division round. And we'll talk about that later. But before we get into talking about spring training only being 6 weeks away, I believe 6 weeks.
Well, give me the chance to segue here, Griff.
Yeah.
My 49ers need a win this weekend. You know who else needs a win?
Who's that?
Guess who? The Toronto Blue Jays, the front office.
Nice segue.
This team needs a win. And I'm not talking a win in the area of Isaiah Kiner-Falefa. I'm talking about something that really jolts and moves the needle. And you and I have been back and forth on this particular topic. Geez, it feels for almost the full year that we've been doing this now. But as we sit here right now, we know some things for sure that we might have been able to assume a couple of months back, but now we know. Now we know it to be sure. That this team not only has money, I mean, we knew that. It's just, does the corporation that owns the team want to spend it on player payroll? We now know that it is willing to spend money on player payroll because it showed us that with Shohei Ohtani, which is a unicorn outlier case. There's no argument there, but the money exists. And so it is time. It is time to have legitimate conversations about identifying and locking in core pieces of this team going forward.
Now, if they do have that money to spend, and we found that out when they went hard after Shohei Ohtani and were legitimately involved, except apparently he missed his flight. But other than that, they were legitimately involved in a $700 million offer to a guy who was going to be a DH this year and a DH and hopefully a right-handed Cy Young contender for the next few years of his contract, or for the final 9 years of his contract. But we know they have that money. And they went in hard on the Yamamoto, the Japanese free agent pitcher who had never thrown a pitch in the major leagues, but is now being counted on among the top 10 pitchers in Major League Baseball. So they were after him too, despite the fact that their pitching staff is already pretty deep and pretty loaded with quality veteran Major League pitchers. So what does that leave them to do? To me, they've showed they have the money to spend. Rogers ownership has. Now, we also know they've spent a shitload of money to renovate Rogers Center and have all of these memberships available and dining clubs and expensive ticket inventory available for not just next year, but into the deep future. So they've taken their shot at Shohei and have this money available. To me, and this is my thought, now is the time where they need to step up and sign both Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and Bo Bichette to 10-year deals, lock them up, make them the cornerstone of this organization, continue to fill in around them year to year as free agents arrive or as trades are available, or when the farm system starts to produce again. They've traded away some top prospects from the farm system. And when you look behind Vlad and Bo, there's nobody pushing them to be those guys, the cornerstones that you build around. And winning teams build around at least 2 homegrown players and then fill in. So I'm saying take that money, that $700 million, and I think combined, by my estimation, they might need $260 million for Vlad and $240 for Bo, maybe a little more, but that still adds up to $500 million over 10 years, and go from there.
Okay, so Bo's locked in for the next 2 years at approximately $30 million total. He'll make a little more than 12 this year and a little more than 17 and a half in 2025. Are you, and I'm getting into the weeds a bit here, but are you suggesting an 8-year extension beyond those 2 years to get the total to 10? Or are you calling for a 10-year extension beyond these 2 years to get the total to 12 years?
No, 10 years total. The 2 remaining years of arbitration, which Bo has already signed for. Vlad is likely to get 19 million plus in arbitration this year, maybe 24. That's why I'm saying that the 10 years for Vlad would be worth slightly more than the 10 years for Bo. But it also, using those last 2 years of arbitration, also makes the average annual value less, so that when Major League Baseball uses those numbers for the penalty for the luxury tax, that it's a lesser number. And it looks better that they didn't spend $30 million for 8 years when they finally got around to negotiating. And if you negotiate with your own guys 2 years in advance of free agency, it's a lot better. You see it more and more where agents and players, once they reach that final year, are going to roll the dice and let's see what we can get in free agency. So now, to me, now is the time to do it. Lock those 2 guys up. And the other argument is that the Blue Jays are the only team that can look back to when they drafted Bo and when they signed Vlad as an international free agent, and they can look at the next several years training them in the minor leagues. They can look at the salary they paid them for the first 4 years in the major leagues, 4+ years, and they can say, okay, add another 10 and we can sort of average the spending that we've had on our own 2-star players. If you sign players as free agents from another organization, you can't do that. You can't logically say that we've spent this much on these players. But if they're your own players that you signed and developed, paid through 4 years of no arbitration and ARB, and now are extending them, you at least have that logically within your own organization. And Rogers, we've discussed, has the money, has the ability to be able to do that. And now is the time.
The other thing is the Toronto Blue Jays are not affected by the real, very real issues affecting some of the regional sports networks, particularly Diamond, which owns the Bally Sports networks. And Bally Sports, if I have this correct, Griff, there's a link to the past of the Fox Sports regional networks down in the U.S. That whether that's relevant or not, we can leave that be. But the Bally Sports regional networks that had the rights for some of these teams, it's gone tits up. It's bankrupt. And so the Toronto
14 to 16 teams.
Right. So that's like half the league. And when you look at, I've been sitting here grousing about just the snail's pace, and it feels like we're back 4 or 5 years ago where we're waiting for some of the better free agents to sign. And it's like spring training. I'm looking out the window right here in Halifax right now, and there are flakes coming down. It's not snowing heavily, but there's some snow outside the window right now. It's like, geez, doesn't feel like it, but spring training is a month away. Pitchers and catchers come in around Valentine's Day. And are we going to be dealing with Cody Bellinger arriving at the Cubs complex in the final week of February, the first week of March? I don't anticipate it'll take that long, but you and I were both there in March of 2019 when Bryce Harper waltzed in to the Philadelphia Phillies complex in Clearwater and held a press conference. I think my shoulder still hurts from the awkward angle I was trying to hold my microphone for 10 consecutive minutes. I was in that scrum just because the Jays happened to be the team the Phillies were playing that day in Clearwater. But the Blue Jays aren't affected by this. I mean, they are owned by a multi-billion-dollar telecommunications corporation. The television sports TV network that broadcast Blue Jays games are owned by the same entity. Like, the money is there. And get back to the Ohtani chase. The money is there if you're willing to spend it. And, I've argued before, I'm still not clear on where Vlad lands in all of this. I would be extremely hesitant to sign him to a $400 or a $500 million contract based on what we've seen the last couple of years. I love Bichette, but I don't think he's a Corey Seager. I think Francisco Lindor with the Mets is overpaid. I think that's been borne out by his production his first 2 years with the Mets. He's 1 year going into the second year of that massive contract extension with New York. But, if you can get Vlad in that $250 million and Bo in that $250 million range, I sign up for that. I stop arguing numbers at that point and I sign up for it. What I'm wondering is whether Vlad and Bo would look at that and say, we're good with that. But when you get back to the RSN conversation and the fact that some teams' ancillary revenues are cratering, there's a shift, right? There's a shift in the market because there's lack of clarity about money in the system right now for some teams.
It is a crazy late winter in terms of free agency, and the free agency has been holding up trades and signings like we're discussing right now. But in the past, it's been players coming to terms with other teams, and now it's agents coming to terms with reality. And the new reality is that the money is not available to go as deep. I mean, you could get your top end guys like Shohei Ohtani and pay him that much money. You can pay the Japanese pitchers that much money. But it wasn't that strong a free agency class. And now you're finding, I think Cody Bellinger is finding it out that there's not as many bidders. You look at Marcus Stroman, and we might discuss him later. I mean, he turned down a $21 million guaranteed and ended up with $37 million for 2 years. Thought the market would be stronger. I think the agents, especially of guys like Vlad and Bo, at the end of this process, at the end of this off season, may come and say, hey, it's a different market. Unless things change, unless there's new revenues for streaming games instead of cable, there's not as much money out there. Take that money now. You are comfortable in that clubhouse. Bo, you're a leader in that clubhouse. You know everything about that organization, that city, that team. You know that they've got a chance, a window, as long as you and Vlad are there, to win, to compete, to contend, to actually win a postseason game rather than losing every year. You've got a window, you've got a chance. So let's do it. And to me, it's an adjustment year for free agency and for agents in particular, because no longer are you comparing yourself to Shohei Ohtani and saying, I'm probably 2/3 as good as that guy, so give me 2/3 of his money. That's not the way it works. It's the same way as in major motion pictures. You know, you look at, I don't know, I don't even know who the major film stars are now, but you look at your top stars, George Clooney, let's say, in Ocean's 15. You pay him so much money, but the extras, the other guys in that movie aren't getting comparable money. They're being paid like support, like they're going to help this movie win, but you're not getting what our star is getting. And I think agents are coming to grips with that reality. And you're not looking at what Bo and Vlad did last year or in the last couple of years. You're looking at, who are these guys? What do they represent to this organization? What do they represent to this fan base now that we haven't done anything else? Can they contribute for the next 10 years? One is 24 years old, one is 25 years old. There's not very many other teams that have stars that are that young and have done that much. So both sides need to step up, get something done, sell some of those private club memberships in the new stadium, and move forward.
Well, here's an idea, Griff. What if 300 is an important number to Vladimir Guerrero Jr.? I'm playing a hypothetical game here. What if 300 is an important number? Or 325? You know what you can do? You're a multi-billion-dollar telecommunications corporation. You're not some guy in Pittsburgh who wants to cry, I'm broke. Defer. Play the Dodgers game. Everybody's griping about what the Dodgers are doing. And look, I get it. But like so many other things in life, far more consequential than Major League Baseball, there is a far gap between morality and legality. And typically what ends up happening is when morality is getting shucked, there will be negotiations to bring legality more in line with morality. Well, that ain't happening yet. And maybe that's part of the next CBA or whatever. But the Toronto Blue Jays, inarguably, I'm not talking about the willingness, but inarguably have the means to defer some cash if it matters enough to the player to get to a certain number. And then you can pay them real dollars, X amount now, some real dollars later, and the player can say, see, I signed for 300 or 325. 350 is starting to push it into my discomfort level, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's important for a lot of players and a lot of agents is the bottom line value, even though, you know, the Dodgers have used the fact that the dollar won't be worth as much down the line. And they've used it in terms of avoiding maximum value on the luxury tax. So when the Dodgers got into that negotiation of deferring money down the road, it knocked 16 teams out of the negotiations. The 16 teams who aren't sure where their future revenue is coming from in terms of regional sports networks and broadcast rights. And the Jays, as you point out, are not one of those teams. The Jays could learn from what the Dodgers did. But the fact that what bothers me about the Dodgers is $2 million up front, $68 million deferred. I mean, that's playing, hard.
Yeah, morality. There's a morality issue there, for lack of a better way to put it.
And it's screwing the state of California, because once he gets into the 68 million, Shohei Ohtani is not going to be living in California with the tax rates that they have. He might move to Texas or Nevada or Florida, or go back to Japan and buy an island where it doesn't have any tax rate. And and so there is a certain morality involved, but it's pro sports, so what the hell.
Yeah, I'm throwing ideas around, and I'll keep coming back to what I say.
I'm saying that the 260 that I mentioned for 10 years, including the final 2 years of arbitration for Vlad, and the 240 that includes the final 2 years of Bo's arbitration, that is reasonable as far as I'm concerned, in terms of if this is going to be a new financial landscape for Major League Baseball. And does he have the possibility of being one of the top players in 5 years in baseball? Does he have the possibility of being a Bryce Harper or one of the guys that really makes a difference? Well, if that's the case, if that's what they're worried about, and we talked about it before recording, then use opt-outs, have some opt-outs in there, but not like after 2 years, after 6 years, 7 years, maybe something like that. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, like, if you look at Jose Barrios, right, and he's not in the echelon that Vladdy projects to be, probably already is, but certainly projects to be. Same with Bo. I mean, Barrios has an opt-out after 2026. So when the Jays signed that extension, they got Barrios for 5 years. They've got 3 years left of that. There's 2 years beyond the opt-out if Jose opts in. So it works out well for both, because Barrios will be early 30s when the 2026 season ends, and he's got a decision to make, and he'll look at his numbers and how he's done, and if he's healthy and all that stuff, and he'll say, okay, I can go get another 5 or 6 year contract. Maybe not 6 at that age, but I can go get a 3, 4, 5 year contract at more money than I've got left for each year of the 2 remaining years on this Blue Jays deal. I'm opting out. And that, of course, doesn't preclude him from returning to Toronto. But he's got it set up that way. And it would make sense to me that Vladdy, at about 30 years old, could look at it and say, okay, I've got 5 years or whatever it is, 6 left on my Blue Jays contract. Can I go get more over 8 or 9? And that would be an interesting deduction to make, because we'll see where the money is regionally in Major League Baseball at that point. Has the league taken over even more of the media production and the broadcast of games? By that point, what role will streaming services have? We know that MLB Media is highly successful, and they do a wonderful job on their own website of proliferating all of their out-of-market games to people who want to pay for it. But, is there a possibility that Amazon or one of these other major streaming services get involved? You just never know, Griff. The landscape could change so much. So I think there's a lot out in the open there. I think an opt-out is a safe thing for both Bo and Vlad.
And to me, that would explain, Bo had signed prior to last season a 3-year deal to take him through free agency. And to me, that would explain the possibility of a long-term deal, would explain why Vlad was not able to reach a number in arbitration. It would explain, because the Jays policy is to go with, once you reach the exchange of numbers, you go through with it unless it's a multi-year deal. And so they're working on a multi-year deal. And I would doubt that it's just a 2-year deal to carry him to free agency, because you don't need to do that, But if it's a long-term deal, and with as many combinations of clauses and opt-outs and deferrals, whatever, but it would be a complicated deal that would require time. And So that's my theory about and it's not like this is a panic move. This would be a panic move of signing Bo and Vlad. This is like, okay, if we get Shohei, we cannot afford to sign Bo and Vlad at this point. We didn't get him. If we get Cody Bellinger, it would be difficult, but it looks like they're not going to get Cody Bellinger because they went out and got Kevin Kiermaier, and now they seem to be front of the line for Jorge Soler or somebody like that, a right-handed hitting bad outfielder with a lot of power. So it's not like this is a panic move. This would always have been on the table at Rogers as a move. If we don't do this, let's do this, because we have expensive inventory to sell, and it's going to be there. The improvements at the stadium and the need to have a good team on the field are going to be there for the next 25 years at least. You put that much money into renovating a stadium, you're not looking at it short term.
I'd love to be a fly on the wall for negotiations if they're happening, when they're happening, because Bo and Vlad are not stupid, and the people around Bo and Vlad are not stupid, and we know for a fact that Bo is extremely plugged into the business side of the game, has interest in that way, certainly mature beyond his years, and I mean, those guys live in that space every single day. They would have a sense that this management group needs a win or two this offseason. And so there would be some leverage in that as well. From their perspective, there would be some leverage in knowing that this front office is not popular. People who are telling you otherwise, just look around. Read around. You know what you feel about all of it. Your senses aren't lying to you. And so that could be a part of it as well, that these guys need wins. Now, it's not their fault they didn't get Ohtani, but the vibe around this team, the culture around this team, the behavior by some, it didn't end well, and it hasn't, and the hot seat hasn't cooled off this offseason. This is an opportunity from the team's perspective to score a win or two. So I think it's advantage player in that situation as well.
Yeah, you look at Alex Anthopoulos just got an extension through 2031 with the Braves, and that was applauded throughout the organization, throughout the fan base, throughout Major League Baseball. You look at the Detroit Lions, they win by a point. Their first playoff win in 30 years or whatever it is, 39 years. And their general manager is handed the game ball by the coach, and the players go crazy in the dressing room. Now, if, for instance, Rogers gave Ross Atkins a 10-year extension, what do you think the reaction in that clubhouse with the fan base and around baseball would be? It would not be the same as Alex getting his extension. So yeah, the players and the fan base know that this front office needs to do something, and we won't call it spectacular. Let's call it special. They need to do something special in the 30 to 40 days before spring training starts. Otherwise, that inventory could sit there with crickets.
We need to be live when that contract extension was announced, Griff, because it would be a hell of an episode. You could watch me internally combust on the spot. Like I would go up in literal flames, and then you'd be like, well, this is great theater for the moment, but now I need a new co-host. I can't talk to a hill of ashes. But yeah, fascinating times. And I mean, here we are, 4 weeks from pitchers and catchers, or right in that ballpark. It's Tuesday, January the 16th as we're recording. So Valentine's Day, get your bouquet of roses is 4 weeks tomorrow. Actually, no, get your bouquet of roses yet. They won't last 4 weeks, but you know what I mean. Plan for it. Fascinating stuff.
The question I got, other than, I mean, it's not just that those two signings that would need to happen. Do you feel, Scotty, that Isaiah Kiner Falefa can handle either second base or third base? And what do they need to do yet in terms of bringing players in to this group.
I was reading.
Bring in one of the two positions from outside, even with the inventory of homegrowns that helped them through August when they were given a 15-game stretch against losers. They need to still make a couple of moves.
I was reading Jim Bowden in The Athletic. He had a piece up, gosh, I think it was over the weekend. It was certainly within the last couple of days. The top 10 remaining free agents and the best fits, the best team fits for those 10. And Matt Chapman was, I think, number 4 on that list, somewhere in there. Bellinger obviously was number 1. And Bowden has Bellinger making sense to return to the Cubs. He has Matt Chapman making sense to return to the Blue Jays. And I think we need to separate initial reaction from the fan base, should that occur, from the reality of the situation. Because I look around, Griff, I mean, Vlad and Bo are Vlad and Bo. But you got unending questions at second base right now, and you've got unending questions at third base right now. And if you want to argue that Isaiah Kiner-Falefa is going to occupy one of those two positions, okay. But he is going to OPS 660. And he's going to OPS plus mid-80s to 90. So he is going to be 10 to 15% worse than the league average hitter. That's his career. There's no indication that there's more in there. So, and Isaiah Kiner-Falefa is not 23 years old with 140 career major league plate appearances. We're talking about a guy who's been around a while and been in a handful of organizations, Rangers, Twins, Yankees. He's been around. Not old, but he's been around. So if that is a guy who's going to get 400 to 500 plate appearances and appear in more games than he does not, you're not getting offense from that spot. So Matt Chapman and his 20 to 30 home runs and his pretty good defense, I mean, maybe they got to circle back on him. Now, here's the thing. I get very scared of year 5 and 6 of that contract if it's a 5 or a 6 year deal. And I look at Matt Chapman sort of the way as with my background of following and rooting for the Chicago Cubs. I always said about Javier Baez, said the moment the range diminishes defensively, Javier Baez becomes Rob Deere. And Javier Baez became Rob Deere right away for the Detroit Tigers. You know, the defense has regressed somewhat, and he is a 200 strikeout a year guy, and he's not even hitting the home runs he used to. My fear with a Matt Chapman is once the defense regresses, and it did ever so slightly, it was still very, very good, but it did ever so slightly last year. What is he when he's no longer an elite third baseman? And if that happens 2 or 3 years into a 5 or a 6 year contract, then you're stuck with him. But in the immediate, you got to do something.
Okay, here's what I would do if I was a GM. And there have been PR guys who have become general managers. So it's not.
We were talking about Ed Wade last week,
Ed
right?
Wade, yeah. Yeah, there's at least 3 or 4. So here's what, if I hadn't been drinking so heavily, I might have had a chance and having so much fun doing my job and waking up every day and saying, God, I love this job. But I might have had a chance, but that's all.
If you had made a decision to be a responsible adult, you might have ended up a major league general manager.
That's right. So here's what I would do. Because right now we agree that the Blue Jays bench may be the worst in baseball, as is, with this 40-man roster. Maybe the worst. If opening day was tomorrow, they would have the worst bench in baseball. So here's what I would do. I would make that trade with the Twins for Jorge Polanco and use some of the inventory, because Edouard Julien is going to be their second baseman. There's no question about that. This kid can hit, and he's getting better as a defender. He's not there, but Polanco is making $10.5 million from a team that is one of the teams that lost their regional sports network. So they've been touting the fact that they want to trade him. So I would trade maybe a Nate Pearson, maybe a couple of those infielders that are excess for the Jays right now. So that I would sign the two guys, Bo and Vlad. I would trade for Jorge Polanco. As spring training comes near, I would sign a 1-year minor league deal with an invitation to spring training for Gio Urshela. That way you're not locked into a 5-year deal for third base like you would be with Matt Chapman. You've got a guy who has good bat-to-ball skills, is a really good defender, was signed by the Indians originally, and so he's got a history with Mark Shapiro and Ross Atkins, and is a serviceable major leaguer for a year. And that would allow Elvis or some of the prospects to maybe develop or give you another option, but also give you a chance to win this year. Then I would sign to a multi-year deal, which we haven't spoken about in a while, but Brandon Woodruff to cover for whoever's going to be leaving after this season, especially Yusei Kikuchi. So those are the moves I would make, but starting with the signing your own 2 potential free agents in 26, signing those guys, and then make those moves.
And Polanco's a left-handed bat. So that's
switch hitter. So that's good.
Yeah. Well, left-handed bat on the strong side of the platoon, right? Which is something that would give you a little more balance in your lineup, especially because Brandon Belt in coming back. And it
and we're still talking about the possibility of an outfielder right-handed hitting DH like Jorge Soler. I'm not discarding that, but those other moves are part of how I would prepare for the 2024 season.
Soler is so interesting to me too, because I mean, if you get what you got from Soler last year, it's going to look good. And if you get what you got from Soler 2 years ago, it's not going to look good. And I just have no idea what to expect from a guy like that. But he's a bopper who strikes out a ton, right? And there are a lot of those in the game, and you can make good money doing it. So just having that threat in the lineup and the knowledge that something special could happen at any moment, especially with this Blue Jays lineup right now being bereft of threats throughout. They got to go out and win one of these bidding wars.
Soler could DH most of his time, but against left-handed pitching, starting pitching, if you wanted to rest Kiermaier or Dalton Varsho, then he could play left field. Soler could play left field, and then you could use the DH spot for Vlad or another one of your position players you want to get off his feet for that game. And then late in the game, you just replace Soler defensively if you've got the lead, and there you go.
I was smirking because when you said he could play left field, I was thinking, well, he could stand out there.
Yeah. I was coaching Oakville one year, and my third baseman got hit in the face by a throw. It was twilight. He got hit in the face. I dragged him out to right field because we needed 2 more outs, and he played right field. Well, he was unconscious, but he played right field, and we won.
And I can actually envision you literally dragging him, like pulling him by the arms, scraping him across the infield, and just saying, "Stand up, pal."
It was twilight, and we only had 9 players, and he needed to play.
Geez, you only had 9 play. Then you literally had the worst bench.
Yeah, you're right about that.
You literally had the worst bench in baseball at any level that night. Non-existent. What do you make of Stroman to New York? This feels like the pursuer finally landed the big date after being in the Yankees DMs for 5 years. Hey, look at me. Hey, look at me. And they finally said, all right. And it's fascinating, Griff, because the year the Jays traded Stroman to the Mets, the Yankees, of course, went to the playoffs and flamed out. But in that period of time, Brian Cashman was asked about why the Yanks didn't go get Marcus Stroman. And I'm paraphrasing because I don't have the exact quote in front of me right now, but he said, I mean, our starting pitchers, the ones we have right now, we have more faith in them than Stroman. And Stroman didn't like that. So I guess convenience and need bring the Yankees back to Stroman, and Marcus is more than happy to go and pitch for the team he's always wanted to pitch for.
Yeah, and there are a couple of things that I find amusing. One of them is that all of those tweets and Instagrams that posts that Stroman had in 2019 about the Yankees and Cashman have been taken down from his X or Instagram. I mean, I've been blocked on X since 2018, so I don't know, but apparently they have been taken down. And the other thing I find amusing is that when Ross Atkins made the trade at the deadline, before the deadline on that last homestand, and had the Mets GM on the phone, and Stroman was ranting and raving, and you could hear it on the other end of the phone. So you obviously knew that Stroman was not happy to be going to your team if you're the GM and you're hearing him screaming at Ross Atkins. That now that GM is now his agent, his representative, and they must both be having a good laugh about him finally getting to go to the Yankees. But the fact of the matter also is that I heard somewhere somebody say, well, you know, I think it was on the baseball MLB network that somebody said, well, he's the type of guy who can thrive in New York because you need a thick skin to thrive in New York. And I'm going, wait a second. Is this the same guy whose mother didn't like a column I wrote and then yelled at me in the clubhouse and called me a racist? And is this the same guy? And now you're saying he has a thick skin? If he thought I was tough, just wait till he gets to New York and refuses to talk to some of those writers because he has a couple of bad starts in a row. I'm not sure this is going to work out really well.
Yeah, I mean, look, he's first of all, he turns 33 on May the 1st, which, as a complete aside and digression, blows my mind. I mean, I remember being at Citizens Bank Park for that exhibition game at the end of spring in March of 2013, before the Jays came home to watch J. Pierre Ancibia try to handle R.A. Dickey's knuckleball in the first inning of opening night. And Marcus, who, you know, would not debut as a big leaguer until 2014, Marcus pitched in that game in Philadelphia. And it was this, you know, young kid, not quite 22 years old yet, and the future. And now you wake up one day and it's like, holy crap, this guy's almost 33. Yeah. It's just one of those wow moments. But like a good mid-rotation piece, the challenge, and you kind of touched on it, Griff, there, but, you know, if you look at his season, this past season with the Cubs, he was lights out, like Cy Young conversation, lights out for the first 3 months. Then he really hit the skids for about 6 weeks before an injury. And it felt like the diagnosis took a while. There's something going on there, but an injury essentially ended his season. And then he claimed it, you know, he was healthy enough to pitch late in the year. The Cubs weren't going to put him back in the rotation if he was, blah, blah, blah. And then there was all that stuff in the summer, too, about, oh, the Cubs are my favorite organization, and I've only ever wanted to pitch in front of this fan base. He was trying to talk his way into a contract extension. The Cubs weren't having anything of it. So I think he is a good mid-rotation piece. I love the fact that he's in the division. And I think the theater of this, just as somebody who covered Marcus, who saw the act, and that's not necessarily a pejorative. There's good and there's bad. There's light and there's darkness there. It's the whole thing. But the fact that he's back in the division, the fact that he's in enemy uniform now, the hated Yankees, it'll just be fascinating to watch, because if he wants to get passive aggressive with Yankees media, if he wants, because he does have a history. He does have a history of the plausible deniability behavior where he throws a dart expecting a negative reaction in return. He gets the expected negative reaction in return, then turns it around and says, see, you all hated me. See, you're all haters. See, you're all bad humans. When really it was he who initiated it. Like, it's like typical narcissistic behavior. So it'll be fascinating to see if the gaslighting act makes an appearance, and how that dynamic between him and the Yankees media goes if it gets ugly.
Yeah, I mean, I like Marcus. We hugged when he made the All-Star team in 2019, and I was the PR guy. It might be the only time he talked to me that spring, or that spring and summer. But he's always felt he's misunderstood. And the person who misunderstands him the most is Marcus, because he had a $21 million guaranteed contract with the Cubs this year, and he opted out, and he ended up having to call the Yankees, or to publicly say that he wanted to be a Yankee. And the Yankees finally, they ran out of options, and they ended up connecting with Marcus and his agent, and he became a Yankee. He's a mid-rotation guy. Probably thinks he'll end up the season being right behind Garrett Cole in that rotation. But like, to turn down a $21 million guaranteed contractor, to opt out and then settle for 38, and God bless him, 38's a lot of money for anyone. You know, for us, that would be like a lifetime or more. But in terms of comparison to other mid-rotation and to other starting pitchers, he overestimated what his value was. So at 38 for 2 with a vesting option for like 140 innings, that would give him 18 more in the third season. That seems like a bad decision, a bad business decision, if for a guy who's always believed in himself and had a chance to pitch one more year and then get another contract, which might have been more lucrative if he had done well with the Cubs.
Yeah, although, but then there's always the what if on the flip side too, right? What if he has another injury interrupted year, and then his market craters and he's in the $10 million per year range on the next deal? So you do the totality of it. I mean, I would look at it this way if I'm Marcus and say, well, at least I know where I'm living for minimum the next 2 years and maybe the next 3. And if the relationship thrives, I'll be 30 going on 36, and maybe there's another couple of years I can swing out of it. I mean, pitchers can go well into their late 30s if their arms are still intact. And, you know, he's not a strikeout guy, Griff. It's not like he sits there and relies on velocity and he's going to become a problem if his 100-mile-an-hour fastball, he can't get that past 93. I mean, he's a guy who's got 5 or 6 different pitches, spins the ball, ground ball specialist when that sinker's on. You know, he's a guy who could pitch till he's 40 if he stays healthy, and there's a team that is comfortable with everything that goes with him.
Personally, I'd rather, if I had the choice, I'd rather play in Chicago than in New York. That's just me, though. I love Chicago. But the other thing that fascinated me when we're talking about other teams is the Mets in the international signing period inking Vladimir Miguel Guerrero.
Yeah, we've got to clarify this, right?
Yeah, I'm brother of Vlad Jr., and he's an outfielder, and I find it fascinating. And it brought back the thought of Ivan Calderon, the outfielder who was traded from the White Sox to the Expos. I think it was in the Tim Raines trade. And Calderon, I talked to him like on road trips and whatever. He had 5 sons, and they were all named Ivan Calderon Jr. And I asked him, what happens if more than one of them gets to the major leagues? How are you going to differentiate? He says, we'll just wait and see. but when you have five and they all have the same name and they were all born within 2 or 3 years of each other, that was crazy. But when I saw the Vladimir Guerrero signing with the Mets, that's what it reminded me of.
The math didn't quite add up for you there, Griff. Well, yeah, I mean, it's funny. John Gibbons, can John Gibbons hold on long enough with the Mets to manage Vladdy Miguel in a Major League Baseball game in the regular season? Because Gibby didn't get that chance with Vladdy here in Toronto, right? Because Vladdy came up in April of 19, and Gibbons' run ended at the end of the 2018 season. Can I hold on, Griff? Chance here now? Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we have a few more episodes leading up to spring training, so we'll see how many of our discussions, suggestions, what we would do, how many of those come true, how many of those.
Well, Griff, I mean, I'm just going to throw it out there, like the reminder, griffsthepitch.com. That's your website. You get all your writing, some of your great conversations, one-on-ones with current Blue Jays, former Montreal Expos. The link to the Exit Philosophy podcast, and we are also on YouTube. If you're listening on Spotify, Apple, iHeartRadio, wherever you get your podcast, you can also look at us if you want. Don't know why you'd want to, but if you want to, you can. YouTube.com/Exit Philosophy. But keep the YouTube page in mind, just for the fact that we will go live, and we will hand select some regular season games that we'll do some live post-game shows for, and we'll make sure that you know what those are well in advance, and we'll make decisions on that front as the season goes on. But if the Blue Jays make a move at any point this week or next, or the week after, or the week after that, because it's going to happen at some point,
it is going to happen.
We'll make sure that we go live. YouTube.com/Exit Philosophy. Keep that in mind. We'll break it down as quickly as we can for you. And if either Griff or I are out of the house and need to get back, we'll be live ASAP once we get all set up. YouTube.com/Exit Philosophy. Want to revisit the NFL picks from last week, see how we did, and then we'll make our picks for divisional round weekend, the 4 games coming up.
Let's do it.
All right. So, I mean, I got to say, and I'm no good at this stuff, and I don't pretend to be, I don't gamble. It's not a moral thing for me. It's just like I'm smart enough to know that I'd be flushing my money down the toilet if I tried. So I also know that once the tip of the needle goes into my vein, I'm addicted. So I don't want to get down that path. But we thought we'd have some fun. And now I'm getting the itch, Griff, because I got 4 out of the 6 games right in wildcard weekend.
You would have made a little bit of money if you were betting all the same number of units on each game, for sure.
Yeah, I had Houston plus 2.5 over Cleveland. So I got that right.
I had that.
I'm going to go with the ones I got right first, not necessarily the games in order. I had Buffalo minus 9.5 over Pittsburgh, so I landed that.
I had that.
I had Green Bay. I took the points there. I had Green Bay covering the 7.5 point spread over Dallas. And when Green Bay was up, like 20 some points late in the first half, I'm like, well, add 7.5 to their lead. I think I'm safe. And obviously was.
I had Dallas in that game. I was caught up in the Dallas playing at home and winning by an average of 14 points. But I had never seen a full game of Jordan Love as a starting quarterback. Ooh. He was awesome. I might find it hard to bet against him in your Niners next week.
He had a that was an awesome performance. Just even some of the types of throws he was making, he looked fantastic. And I had Tampa, and now I will acknowledge I was not, and I might have even said it last week, but I was not comfortable with this choice. But I saw what my Niners did to the Eagles, and I saw what happened to the Eagles after they played the Niners, and they cratered. And quite frankly, Griff, I had Tampa Bay plus 2.5 over Philadelphia, and Tampa Bay annihilated them. And if you consider the fact that the Buccaneers dropped 5 passes in the first half, including that Baker Mayfield shot down the right sideline on the go route to Mike Evans. If Evans had caught that, that would have been a touchdown on that play. And then there would have been a couple of other drops that, had they been caught, would have extended drives that could have resulted in field goals or more touchdowns. Tampa Bay, by rights, I'm talking strictly about the way that Philadelphia played last night. Tampa Bay should have put 50 plus on the Eagles, and it was 32-9, if I'm not mistaken. So obviously taking Tampa Bay plus 2.5 was the right decision, even though I wasn't comfortable with it at the time.
I also had Tampa Bay, and I was betting more against Matt Patricia than anything else, the defensive coordinator, who is probably the worst that I've seen in a long time. And not that I would be able to tell specifically anything that he did, except the result of his team ever since he took over as the team's defensive coordinator. Not very good. And my children are all big Tampa Bay Buccaneer fans, and so I couldn't go against them. I couldn't sit in the same room with any of them and say, "Hey, I picked the other team." So
how did they become Tampa fans? Was that the Super Bowl in the early 2000s, or
that was Matt, my eldest? He was a huge fan of that group and has been ever since. And so he taught the rest of them to love the Buccaneers.
Nice.
Yes.
I'll tell you what, Griff, like it's told you earlier, I became a 49ers fan at 9.5 years old. Like, you know what, I was none the wiser at that point. But when you end up picking a team in a pretty good weather city, it gives you a great excuse to travel, and you can fit a game in like November or December, and you know you're not going to have to go with 9 layers of clothing on and all that. Tampa Bay, that any excuse to go down to the Gulf Coast of Florida, take it.
Yeah. When the NFL schedule comes out, it's amazing the number of people, and we've discussed it before, the number of cities that are traveling cities for their fans, and they immediately book their reservations for that game on the road, especially if it's a warm weather city or Vegas or somewhere like that. And the NFL is tremendous in terms of traveling fans.
Well, I was saying to a friend the other day, because all the teams know their opponents for next season now. They don't learn until May the dates of the games.
Right.
But the 49ers have road games in Tampa, in Green Bay, and in Buffalo, and in Miami next year. So I was saying, well, I want to go to Green Bay in September, and I want to go to Tampa in December, because I don't want to melt in Tampa in September, and I don't want to freeze in Green Bay in December.
There's one game that we haven't talked about from this past weekend from
Well, there's two. I don't know why I decided to give Miami more credit than they ever deserved, but I did. And I took Miami to cover 3.5 points. I took the points. They got embarrassed. And so I got that wrong. And I thought the Lions were going to beat the Rams. And I figured with a field goal spread, Detroit was favored by 3. If I think Detroit's going to win the game, then I should take Detroit at that number. Sure enough, Detroit won, but only by a point. So those were my two incorrect.
I took the Dolphins, not because I thought they could perform in minus 20-degree weather, but I thought, having seen the Chiefs receivers and the stone hands that they had in the best weather, that balls would be bouncing off their hands the entire game. And then Rice came up big, and so I had that one wrong. I didn't think that Patrick Mahomes had any receivers, and Kelsey was looking up in a frozen booth at his girlfriend and probably missed a couple of passes. But so I had that one wrong also. But I also, if you play back the tape from last week, I also said that the Detroit Rams game could be a 1-point game either way because of the coaching of that lunatic on the Lions sideline, that he might try and go for a 2-point conversion to win it at the last minute. So either win by 1 or lose by 1. That didn't happen, but the decision was by 1 point. So I took the points and I had a winner there. So I was also 4-2, and we'll see what we are this week.
And it turns out that Dan Campbell, who you call a lunatic, was a little smarter than Sean McVay, who badly needed those 2 second-half timeouts he burned in the third quarter at the end of the game, right? Because Detroit was able to run out the clock. Rams couldn't stop it. All right, so we'll go in.
I was just saying lunatic because I believe at his opening press conference, he was talking about chewing the knees off his opponents, but
biting kneecaps.
Yeah,
biting kneecaps. Yeah, we might get beat, but we're going to bite your kneecaps.
Right.
All right.
Let's go this week. Four games. What do you got?
All right, and we'll go in order of the games.
Yep.
So the Saturday games involve the top seeded teams in both conferences who are coming off the bye week, and the numbers are large. So both of these numbers scare me. Baltimore is a 9-point, as we sit here today, a 9-point home favorite over the Houston Texans. I think Baltimore is going to win this game, but I think it's going to be a good game, and I could see the Ravens winning this game by a touchdown. So I am going to take the Texans. I'm not comfortable with really any of these. Well, I feel good about the Buffalo pick that I'll share in a bit, but the Buffalo Kansas City pick. But I am going to take the Texans to cover the spread. I'm going to take the points.
I've got the Texans also. I've been a big fan since early in the season. And when Stroud came back and responded like he has, I think he can carry it. Even an outdoor game where you're not sure what the weather will be like, I think he'll be fine. And I also, don't think that the Ravens offense is looking to pile it on, that they'll be just content to win 3.7 points, like you said.
49ers are a 10-point favorite right now at home over Green Bay. And of course, it's hard for me to ignore my heart when looking at this game. There is a mitigating factor that takes my mind back to week 6 in Cleveland when the Browns beat the 49ers. And that is that there's rain in the forecast in Santa Clara for Saturday night. And we saw some issues with Brock Purdy gripping the football in Cleveland in wet weather. But hear me out. Now, when I initially looked at this, I thought I'm going to take Green Bay to cover. I think the 49ers are going to win this game, but I'm going to take Green Bay to cover. I've come off that. I'm going to take the 49ers to cover this spread. I'm going to hope that the elements don't play the role that they could. But here's my theory. I think the Green Bay Packers can score points in this game. I mean, Jordan Love was fantastic against Dallas. This is a different beast. I've watched every single minute of every single 49ers game this season. I'm a huge fan. The 49ers are not the Cowboys. The culture around the team, the focus of the team, the togetherness of that group stands out to me, even as a fan of the team. This team is on a mission. I think the Packers will score 20-plus points in this game, but the Packers' defense will get exposed. The 49ers have weapons all over the field. This, to me, could end up like the 49ers' Week 16 game. I think it was 16. No, that was the Baltimore game. The Week 15 game in Arizona, where the Niners give up 20-plus points to the Cardinals, but score 45. I think the 49ers can win this game by more than 10 points in a high-scoring game. And if a team is going to be sort of suppressed, it will end up being the Packers. The 49ers have a better defense than Dallas. I will take I'm going to stand on my platform and with my team. I'm going to take the 49ers to cover this 10-point spread. Maybe not by a lot, but I think they'll do it.
Usually when you have two big spreads in the playoff game on the same day, the underdogs don't both cover. And I've taken the Texans as an underdog at 9 points. I'm going to go against my own rule and pick the Packers because, like we were discussing earlier, I didn't know Jordan Love was as good as he showed in Dallas. And so I'm going to take the 10 points, although the skill players for the Niners are unbelievable. There's nothing, no package in the NFL that quite matches up with that. And I don't think that Brock Purdy's little hands being wet is going to affect it at all. My favorite bet in this game would be the over, agreeing with you that Green Bay is going to score, but the Niners are going to score a lot. So I might just go with the over, but if I was going to take a side, I'd take the 10 points in the Packers.
I mean, I could see Jordan Love having a great game and the Packers still losing by 2 scores. Not for no other reason than just there's a talent gap at this point. But I will not take anything away from Jordan Love or the come up that the Packers have been on in the back half of the season, especially when you consider that they played this year with the youngest roster in the NFL, in no small part because they had Aaron Rodgers' dead salary cap money on their books. So to see them thrive, and I am not a Green Bay Packers fan. I've talked about my axis of evil before, if I can use a George W. Bush term. That's the Cowboys, Packers, and Seahawks. The 3 teams as a 49ers fan I hate, but I give Green Bay all the credit in the world, and I love the fact that they have thrived with that asshole Rodgers out of the picture.
Well, one of my favorite, just listening to NFL discussion, is when Green Bay plays the Vikings and I hear Dan Schulman talking to Arash Madani. That's one of my favorite because Schulman is a big Packer fan and Arash lives and dies with Kirk Cousins. And and that's one of my favorite matchups. But yeah, no, so at least somebody's a big Green Bay Packers. There's a lot of Green Bay Packers fans in the GTA and in my sphere anyway. And you're just not one of them.
No, I'm not one of them. Although, unlike Arash, I would go to Lambeau to see the 49ers play. Arash won't, because, the Vikings go to Lambeau every year. They're divisional rivals. Arash is like, no, I will not set foot in Lambeau Field. I would go to Lambeau and maybe should next year because the Niners have a road game in Green Bay. Sunday's games. So Detroit is a 6-point favorite at home over the Buccaneers. I'm going to lay the points. If you're going to give me Detroit at less than a touchdown right now, I'm going to jump on that. I like the Lions to win this game by at least a touchdown.
Despite my family all being Buccaneers fans and liking Baker Mayfield ever since he was in college, I'm going to have to go with the Lions and their lunatic coach and just the storyline of Detroit finally having a winner and maybe moving on to the next round and playing the Niners.
And lastly, the Bills are a field goal favorite at home over the Kansas City Chiefs. I as I've said before, I don't keep up with, I'm not a gambler, so I don't know the theories and whatnot and whether they've changed, but it used to be that the home team was essentially worth 3 points. So if the home team Buffalo is favored by 3 points in at least the old days, then the idea is that this is a pick'em game. That if this was on a neutral field, it would be a pick'em game. I like the Bills in this game. I think Kansas City gets hit with reality because they have trended that way all season. The Miami Dolphins aren't any good. They are to the AFC what the Dallas Cowboys are to the NFC. They'll kick your ass if you suck, and they'll get thoroughly outclassed if you have even halfway a good defense. And if they have to go and play in cold weather. So the Chiefs took advantage of Miami. I don't take too much away from last week's game. I think the Bills are on a mission. The only issue with Buffalo is they suffered the Milano and Tre'Davious White injuries in season. They lost Bernard yesterday, so they are banged up in the second and third levels of their defense, the linebackers and cornerback / safeties core of that defense. But I just, as a 49ers fan who expects my team to make the Super Bowl, I would rather Kansas City advance because I think they're vulnerable this year. But I got to go with Buffalo to cover this spread, Griff. I think the Bills can win this game by a touchdown or maybe 10 points.
Yeah, I would. I mean, you look at the Bills and their field goal kicker was struggling a little bit, which usually carries over. It's supposed to be -5 degrees with no snow next weekend, but the forecast can change. So lake effect snow could come roaring down into the stadium. And their punter pulled a hamstring on that blocked field goal. So who knows who's going to punt for them. Their linebacker core, as you said, is hurting badly. But to me, Josh Allen, I love Josh Allen as a quarterback for what he does, for the chances he takes, for the mistakes he makes, for the humanity he shows. But I think in a situation like this, playing against Patrick Mahomes, finally at home instead of in Kansas City, I'm going to take the Bills and give the 3 points.
Yeah. Patrick Mahomes has been in the playoffs every year of his career, and he is on the road in a playoff game for the first time.
Yeah, not counting Super Bowls that are neutral
site. Yeah. Well, or in the case of Tampa Bay, it was a road game because the Buccaneers just happened to host. But you know what I mean? Like, first time that his team has been the lower seeded team, which is just wild when you consider that he is in his 6th year as a starter in the NFL. Quite a story. Should be great. Great rivalry, Kansas City, Buffalo over the last few years in the AFC, and it should carry over. It'd be great that the game is in Buffalo. Bills Mafia choke slamming each other off of snowbanks into tables they've lit on fire. I don't know if you saw the clip of that, Griff, but that felt like some high IQ behavior. But Bills Mafia is going to be out in full force.
I love the Sunday video of the fan with no shirt sliding down the chute full of snow and pushing it with his body all the way down into the excess area. That was terrific. That was typical Bills Mafia fan behavior, and you got to love it.
So we'll check in on these picks next week. Our plan is to drop the next Exit Philosophy next Monday. Hopefully there will be some Jays movement to talk about. We're not expecting any weather postponements in the NFL playoffs that would move a game to Monday, which might lead us to move to Tuesday so we can break down all of our picks. But if the Jays do make a move, one more reminder, if the Jays do make a move between now and next Monday, Griff and I will go live on our YouTube page, youtube.com/exitphilosophy. Griff is still writing up a storm at griffsthepitch.com. The link to this podcast, you'll be able to find that there too, griffsthepitch.com. We're getting into the back half of January now, Griff. Hopefully the movement starts in Major League Baseball with pitchers and catchers showing up to Florida and Arizona in 4 weeks.
I think agents are finally coming to terms with reality, and we will see movement because players really need to know where they're going to be training, where they're going to be living, and get that ball rolling. It's just good for the players and their families, and I think that's going to start happening. And thanks to you, Scotty, and thanks to everyone for listening. And we'll see you next Monday or sooner if the Jays cooperate.